Context of the passage. This passage occurs right after Jesus performs one of his most famous miracles, the raising of Lazarus from the dead. Lazarus had been dead for 4 days, and Jesus miraculously calls him out of the tomb, alive again. This event deeply impacts those who witness it and causes a ripple effect in the communities around him. After the miracle, many people who were there to mourn for Lazarus saw the miracle and were so amazed that they believed in Jesus. John 11:45. This miracle was a sign that Jesus had divine authority. Raising someone from the dead was a powerful proof of his identity and power as the Messiah. However, some people who witnessed the miracle had a different reaction. Instead of being moved to faith, they went straight to the Pharisees and reported what Jesus had done. John 11:46. The Pharisees were a religious group within Judaism who were very strict in following Jewish laws. They were deeply concerned about Jesus' growing influence and how it might disrupt the status quo in Jewish religious and political life. John 11:45-54. Many of the Jews, therefore, who had come with Mary and had seen what he did, believed in him. But some of them went to the Pharisees and told them what Jesus had done. So the chief priests and the Pharisees gathered the council and said, "What are we to do? For this man performs many signs. If we let him go on like this, everyone will believe in him, and the Romans will come and take away both our place and our nation." But one of them, Caiaphas, who was high priest that year, said to them, "You know nothing at all, nor do you understand that it is better for you that one man should die for the people, not that the whole nation should perish." He did not say this of his own accord, but being high priest that year, he prophesied that Jesus would die for the nation, and not for the nation only, but also to gather into one the children of God who are scattered abroad. So from that day on, they made plans to put him to death. Jesus therefore no longer walked openly among the Jews, but went from there to the region near the wilderness, to a town called Ephraim, and there he stayed with the disciples. The gathering of the Sanhedrin, John 11:47-48. The Pharisees and the chief priests, the religious leaders who had authority over the Jewish faith, now gather a special meeting called the Sanhedrin. The Sanhedrin was the highest Jewish council, made up of the chief priests, elders, and scribes. It was like the Jewish Supreme Court that decided religious and legal matters. In this meeting, the religious leaders face a huge problem. What are they going to do about Jesus? They say, "What are we to do? For this man performs many signs." They recognize that Jesus is performing miracles, and his actions are making a huge impact on the people. He's drawing large crowds and getting their attention, which is beyond their control. Their concern is that if they don't stop Jesus, everyone will start believing in him. John 11:448. This could be a problem for several reasons. If more people start following Jesus, there might be a rebellion or uprising against the Roman Empire. Rome was in control of Judea at the time, and if they thought there was any threat of rebellion, they would quickly squash it. The Jewish leaders were afraid that this could lead to Rome taking away their position and authority over the Jewish people. The Romans had granted the Jewish leaders certain powers, but those powers were limited. If things got out of hand, Rome might strip them of everything, including their authority and the land. This shows us that the religious leaders' concerns were rooted in self-preservation. They weren't focused on whether Jesus was the Messiah or whether his message was true. Their main worry was how Jesus' growing popularity would threaten their political and religious power. Caiaphas speaks, John 11:49-50. At this point, Caiaphas, the high priest, speaks up. The high priest had a special role in Judaism, serving as the leader of the Jewish religious system. The high priest was also seen as the person who had the closest connection to God. He was expected to speak with authority. Caiaphas is blunt and cold-hearted in his response. He says, "You know nothing at all, nor do you understand that it is better for you that one man should die for the people, not that the whole nation should perish." What does Caiaphas mean here? He's essentially saying, "You're not thinking clearly. We need to sacrifice Jesus to protect the whole nation. It's better that one man dies than we risk losing everything." Caiaphas's logic is pragmatic and political. He's saying that if Jesus continues to gain followers, the Romans might get scared and destroy the entire Jewish nation. The leaders might lose everything, so it would be better for Jesus to die rather than the whole nation suffering. At this moment, Caiaphas is thinking about survival, how to keep the nation and the leadership safe from Roman wrath. He doesn't care about the truth of Jesus' message or the morality of having him killed. He just wants to protect the religious system. Caiaphas's prophetic words. John 11:51-52. John, the author of the Gospel, adds a remarkable insight here. Caiaphas did not realize that, in saying this, he was speaking prophetically. John writes that Caiaphas did not say this on his own accord, but because he was the high priest that year, he prophesied that Jesus would die for the nation. And not just for the nation of Israel, but also to gather into one the children of God who are scattered abroad. John 11:52. Here's what this means. Caiaphas was speaking the truth without realizing it. His words about one man dying for the nation weren't just about saving the Jewish nation from Rome. They were a prophetic statement about Jesus' ultimate sacrifice. Caiaphas was thinking about saving Israel from political destruction, but John shows us that God was working in this moment to speak about a much greater salvation. Jesus' death would not only save the Jewish people, but also bring salvation to the Gentiles, non-Jews, to unite all of God's people. Through his death, Jesus would offer salvation to all who believe, bringing them into God's family. The decision to kill Jesus, John 11:53. As a result of this council meeting, the Sanhedrin decides to take action. From that day on, they made plans to put Jesus to death, John 53. This marks a critical turning point in the gospel. The plot to kill Jesus becomes official, and the religious leaders are intent on eliminating Jesus from their lives. Their fear and jealousy of his popularity and message lead them to a decision to sacrifice him for the sake of their own power. This sets in motion the series of events that will lead to Jesus' arrest, trial, and crucifixion. John 11:54. After this, Jesus withdraws from the public eye. He no longer walks openly among the Jews, John 11:54, because the decision to kill him has been made and the timing is not yet right for his death. Jesus moves to a town called Ephraim, which is near the wilderness. This town was likely isolated, a safe place for Jesus to retreat with his disciples. Why does Jesus withdraw? Jesus knew his time had not yet come. He still had more to teach and do before the appointed time for his death. It also shows us that Jesus, even in the face of danger and opposition, is still in control of his own fate. His actions are guided by God's plan, and he is not rushing into his death until everything has been set in motion according to God's will. Key themes in the passage. 1. Self-preservation versus God's plan. The Jewish leaders' main concern is self-preservation. They are so focused on protecting their power that they fail to recognize the divine plan unfolding right before their eyes. God is using this situation, even their evil intentions, to accomplish his greater purpose of salvation. 2. Prophecy in unexpected places. Caiaphas's prophecy about one man dying for the people wasn't something he fully understood, but it was true. God works in mysterious ways, and sometimes even people with bad intentions can speak words that align with his will. 3. Jesus' death as a greater salvation. While the Sanhedrin thought they were acting to protect Israel from Roman wrath, God had a bigger plan. Jesus' death would not just save Israel, but would bring all people, Jews and Gentiles, into his kingdom. Jesus' sacrifice is a universal act that brings salvation to everyone who believes in him. 4. Jesus' control over his mission. Jesus' withdrawal to Ephraim shows that he is in control of his mission. His death will happen at God's perfect time, and he will continue his ministry until that time comes. Applications for us. 1. Trusting in God's timing. Just as Jesus knew his mission would unfold according to God's timing, we should trust in God's timing in our own lives. Even when we face opposition or difficulties, God is working out his plan for us. 2. Not fearing opposition. Like Jesus, we might face opposition or rejection, But we can be encouraged that even in such times, God has a greater purpose for us. We should remain faithful and trust that God is in control. 3. The power of Jesus' sacrifice. Jesus' death on the cross wasn't just a tragic event. It was the ultimate act of love that made a way for all people to be reconciled to God. We should never forget the power and significance of his sacrifice.